I bid you welcome.
To a new world of gods and monsters.
How do you like that, eh?
Even a man who's pure at heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the moon is full and bright.
I love dead, hate living.
It's a perfect night for mystery and horror. The air itself is filled with monsters.
Cesar, the somnambulist, and the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Dr. Warren and Mr. O'Connor and Der Januskopf, Paul Orlok and the Hands of Orlok, Ivan the Terrible and Waxworks, Gwynplaine and the Man Who Laughs, Major Strasser and Casablanca, each an incredibly versatile and dynamic performance by one incredible performer. No, I'm not referring to the Man of 1,000 Faces, Lon Chaney. These roles were all masterfully played by German actor Conrad Veidt. While Veidt is certainly most remembered for his roles in horror films and the silent era, it's somewhat surprising he didn't become a horror icon during the talkie era alongside Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. Still, Veidt made his mark on Universal Monsters history as the ghastly grinning Gwynplaine and Paul Lenny's The Man Who Laughs. Yet Veidt proved to be more than a one-trick pony. His emotive acting style and distinctive features elevate the man beyond being typecast in horror films. Conrad Veidt remains a legend of the silver screen. I mean the Wolfman, and this is the Monster Archives. Hans Walter Conrad Veidt was born on January 22, 1893, in his parents' home in Berlin, to Amelie Marie and Philipp Heinrich Veidt, a former military man turned civil servant. Veidt would later recall, like many fathers, he was affectionately autocratic in his home life, strict, idealistic. He was almost frantically conservative. By contrast, Amelie was sensitive and nurturing. Veidt was nicknamed Connie, C-O-N-N-I-E, also spelled C-O-N-N-Y, by his family and friends. His family was Lutheran, and Veidt was baptized on March 26, 1893. He was later confirmed in a ceremony at the Protestant Evangelical Church at Alt-Schönberg, Berlin, on March 5, 1908. Veidt's only sibling, an older brother named Karl, died in 1900 of scarlet fever at the age of 9. The family spent their summers in Potsdam. 2 years after Karl's death, Philipp Veidt became ill and required heart surgery. Knowing that the Veidt family could not afford to pay the high surgery fee, the doctor only charged what the family could comfortably pay. Impressed by the surgeon's skill and kindness, Conrad vowed to model my life on the man that saved my father's life, and he wished to become a surgeon. His vision of a medical career was thwarted when he graduated without a diploma in 1912, ranked 13th out of 13 pupils. He became discouraged over the amount of study necessary for him to qualify for medical school. A new career path opened for Veidt in 1911 during a school Christmas play in which he delivered a long prologue before the curtain rose. The play was badly received, yet the audience was heard to mutter, "Too bad the others didn't do as well as Veidt." Veidt began to study all of the actors he could and wished to pursue a career in acting, much to the disappointment of his father, who called actors gypsies and outcasts. Conrad raised enough money from odd jobs, as well as his allowance, to begin attending Berlin's many theaters. He stood outside the Duchess Theater after every performance, waiting for the actors and hoping to be mistaken for one. In the late summer of 1912, at the age of 19, he met a theater porter who introduced him to the actor Albert Blumenreich, who agreed to give Veidt acting lessons for 6 marks. He took 10 lessons before auditioning for Max Reinhardt, who is regarded as one of the most prominent stage directors of the early 20th century, reciting Goethe's Faust. During his audition, Reinhardt looked out of the window the entire time. He offered Veidt a contract as an extra for 1 season's work, from September 1913 to August 1914, with a pay of 50 marks a month. During this time, Veidt played bit parts as spear carriers and soldiers. His mother attended almost every performance. His contract with the Deutsches Theater was renewed for a 2nd season, but by then, World War I had begun. On December 28, 1914, Veidt enlisted in the army. In 1915, he was sent to the Eastern Front as a non-commissioned officer and took part in the Battle of Warsaw. He contracted jaundice and pneumonia and had to be evacuated to a hospital on the Baltic Sea. While recovering, he received a letter from his girlfriend, Lucy Mannheim, telling him that she had found work at the Front Theater in Libau. Intrigued, Veidt applied for the theater as well. As his condition had not improved, the army allowed him to join the theater so that he could entertain the troops. Despite his time performing at the theater, his relationship with Mannheim ended. In late 1916, he was re-examined by the army and deemed unfit for service. He was given a full discharge on January 10, 1917. Veidt returned to Berlin, where he re-entered the Deutsches Theater. There, he played a small part as a priest that got him his first rave review. The reviewer is noted for saying, "God would keep Veidt from the films," or "God save him from the cinema." From 1917 until his death, Conrad Veidt appeared in more than 100 films. Filmed in late 1916, Veidt's film debut was in Robert Reinert's The Path of Death, released in February 1917. It is a lost film. Many of his early films are now lost. In 1919, he starred in Different from the Others, a silent melodrama produced during the Weimar Republic. The film was intended as a polemic against the then current laws under Germany's Paragraph 175, which made homosexuality a criminal offense. It was one of the first sympathetic portrayals of gay men in cinema. The following year, Veidt gave one of his most memorable performances as the murderous somnambulist Cesar in Robert Wien's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It was released on February 26, 1920, just as foreign film industries were easing restrictions on the import of German films following World War I, so it was screened internationally. Accounts differ as to its financial and critical success upon its release, but modern film critics, historians, and fans have nearly unanimously praised it as a revolutionary film. Critic Roger Ebert called it, arguably, the first true horror film. And film reviewer Danny Perry called it cinema's first cult film, as well as a precursor for art house films. Considered a classic, it helped draw attention to the artistic merit of German cinema and had a major influence on American films of the 1920s and 30s, particularly horror and film noir. Screenwriter Hans Janowitz originally intended the part of Cesar for his friend, actor Ernst Deutsch. Of course, the part ultimately went to Veidt, who, along with Werner Krauss as Caligari, enthusiastically took part in many aspects of production. Here is Veidt's personal thoughts on Caligari. This film was the turning point in my career. Everything I had done up till now, on the stage and the films, was building me up. But Caligari established me and made my continental reputation. Veidt starred in other silent horror films like The Hands of Orlok, released on September 24, 1924. Variety wrote, "Were it not for Veidt's masterly characterization, The Hands of Orlok would be an absurd fantasy in the old-time mystery thriller class." Veidt's next film, released on October 6, 1924 in Austria, was Paul Linney's Waxworks. It was a silent anthology film that links its stories by a plot thread about a writer who accepts a job from a waxworks proprietor to write a series of stories about the exhibits of Caliph of Baghdad, portrayed by Emil Jannings, Ivan the Terrible, played by Veidt, and Jack the Ripper, played by Werner Krauss, in order to boost business. The film would partially inspire the 1988 comedy horror film Waxworks, starring Zach Galligan, David Warner, and Dana Ashbrook. The Student of Prague, released on October 25, 1926, was another of Veidt's macabre performances. Directed by Heinrich Galeen, one of the directors of The Golem, The Student of Prague is regarded as his magnum opus. Werner Krauss joined Veidt and the cast once again. After so many horror roles, Veidt did find himself becoming the victim of typecast. While we're not certain where the nicknames originated, he had a few, all of which were appropriate and entertaining. The Man with the Wicked Eyes, and King of the Goose Flesh. A modern book title refers to Veidt as the Demon of the Silver Screen. Veidt found this reputation a nuisance. At the time, he wrote, "It is really glorious to be popular, but the fact that God and the world see in me a quite different man from the one I am, that is something not at all pleasant." He complained that he couldn't walk into a restaurant without women gasping, "Look at him! What a demon he is!" When his wife tried to hire a maid, the woman balked. "What? I should work for this bloodthirsty man who slaughters women like hens?" Veidt's striking features, expressive face, crystal-like eyes, and his tall, lean figure seemed to be the embodiment of strange and exotic characters. He was 165 pounds and 6 foot 3 inches. He was not considered the typical fellow next door, nor the handsome young lover, although I know plenty of modern women who would strongly disagree with that former sentiment. As a result, nearly from the beginning of his film career, he was typecast as a character actor or villain. Still, Veidt proved he could do it all. In 1929, he had the leading role in Germany's first talking picture, Land Without Women. In the late 1920s, he moved to Hollywood, making a few films there, including Universal's The Man Who Laughs, one of his most famous roles. However, following the advent of talkies and his thick German accent, he returned to Germany. During this time, he lent his expertise to tutoring aspiring performers, including character actress Lisa Golm. Veidt greatly opposed the Nazi regime, later contributing funds for the relief of Bretons during the German Blitz bombings. Soon after the Nazi Party took power in Germany, by March of 1933, Nazi politician Joseph Goebbels, who was the chief propagandist and then Reich Minister of Propaganda from 1933 to 1945, was purging the film industry of political opponents and Jews. In April 1933, a week after Veidt had married his third and final wife, Flora Ilona Barta Gregor, a Hungarian Jew, also known as Lily, Lilli, or Lily, Lily, the couple immigrated to Britain before any action could be taken against either of them. Goebbels had imposed a racial questionnaire, which required everyone employed in the German film industry to declare their race to continue to work. Veidt filled out the questionnaire, marking his race as Jew. Veidt was not Jewish, but since his wife was, he would neither renounce the woman he loved nor collaborate with the regime as many others did. Veidt showed solidarity with the German Jewish community, who were being stripped of their rights as German citizens in the spring of 1933. Veidt was informed that if he divorced his wife and declared support for the new regime, he could continue to act in Germany. Several other leading actors who were unsympathetic to the Nazis prior to 1933 switched allegiances to continue working in the industry. By marking on the official questionnaire that he was Jewish, Veidt rendered himself unemployable in Germany. He felt the sacrifice was worth it, as there was nothing in the world that would compel him to end his relationship with his wife. Goebbels remarked that Veidt would never act in Germany again. After arriving in Britain, Veidt improved his English and starred in the original anti-Nazi versions of The Wandering Jew in 1933 and Jew Suis in 1934, the latter being directed by the exiled German-born Lothar Mendes and produced by Michael Balkan for Gaumont British. He naturalized as a British subject on February 25, 1939. Veidt was multilingual at this point, making films in French with expatriate French directors and in English, including 3 of his best-known roles for British director Michael Powell in The Spy in the Black in 1939 and Contraband and The Thief of Baghdad in 1940. The Thief of Baghdad is a Technicolor historical fantasy that is wonderfully regarded to this day. Roger Ebert added the film to his great movies list, calling it on a level with The Wizard of Oz. He adds, "It maintains a consistent spirit, and that spirit is one of headlong joy and storytelling." Ebert praised the performances of Sabu and Veidt. The Thief of Baghdad has been highly influential on later films based on the Book of 1001 Nights. In fact, Disney's 1992 animated masterpiece, Aladdin, borrows freely from it, particularly the characters of the evil vizier and the sultan, both of whom were designed and drawn with similarity to the characters in The Thief of Baghdad. The villain, Jafar, is named after the character played by Conrad Veidt. By 1941, Veidt and Ilona had returned to the United States and settled in Hollywood to assist the British effort in making American films that might persuade the then neutral and still isolationist United States to join the war against the Nazis. Before leaving the UK, the Veidts gave a large portion of their life savings to the British government to help finance the war effort, and then provided an American home for an English child for the duration of the war. Realizing that Hollywood would most likely typecast him in Nazi roles, he had his contract mandate that they must always be villains. His final 8 films were all American, including George Cukor's A Woman's Face in 1941, which starred Joan Crawford and Melvyn Douglas, as well as Nazi Agent in 1942, in which he had a dual role as both an aristocratic German Nazi spy and the man's twin brother, an anti-Nazi American. Of course, his most famous Hollywood role was as Major Heinrich Strasser in Casablanca, which began production before the United States had entered World War II. Veidt made comment about this well-received role, noting that it was an ironic twist of fate that he was praised for portraying the kind of character who had enforced him to leave his homeland. In Casablanca, Veidt of course starred alongside Humphrey Bogart, Ingrid Bergman, Claude Rains, and Peter Lorre. Veidt's final role was Hassert Seidel in the 1943 MGM spy film Above Suspicion, once again sharing the screen in a supporting role alongside Joan Crawford. The film was released in May of 1943, after Veidt had passed away. In the 1930s, he learned that he shared a condition that had killed his mother. The condition was aggravated by his chain smoking, and Veidt took nitroglycerin tablets as treatment. He died of a heart attack on April 3, 1943, while playing golf at the Riviera Country Club in Los Angeles, with singer Arthur Fields and his personal physician. In his personal life, Veidt enjoyed sports, gardening, swimming, golfing, classical music, and reading fiction and nonfiction, including occultism. He once considered himself a powerful medium. He was married 3 times, first to a cabaret entertainer, Gussie Hull, from June 1918 to 1922. Veidt's second wife was Felicitas Radke, from an aristocratic Austrian family. They met at a dance party in December 1922, or at a Charleston dance competition in 1923. Radke divorced her husband for Veidt, and they married on April 18, 1923. They had a daughter, Vera Viola Maria, who was born on August 10, 1925. Veidt was not present at her birth due to being in Italy working on The Fiddler of Florence. He took the first available train to Berlin and wept as he met mother and child at the hospital. He was so hysterical from joy that he had to be sedated and kept in the hospital overnight. From September 26th to 1929, the Veidts lived in a Spanish-style house in Beverly Hills. He enjoyed the company of the immigrant community, including friends Carl Laemmle, F.W. Murnau, and Greta Garbo, as well as Gary Cooper. Radke and Veidt divorced in 1932, with Radke saying the stresses of frequent relocations and the separations due to Veidt's acting career frayed their marriage. Viola would spend her summer vacations with her father, which she called the happy times. She stayed with him 3 or 4 months of the year until the outbreak of World War II. She passed away on February 2, 2004 in New Orleans at the age of 78. Of course, Veidt's third and final wife was the aforementioned Ilona Gregor. They remained married until his death in 1943. They resided at 617 North Camden Drive in Beverly Hills. Much like Bela Lugosi, Conrad Veidt was often typecast, yet neither allowed this to hinder their dedication to giving each performance their all. Veidt is most fondly remembered today by genre fans. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari remains one of the most influential horror films of all time, with Veidt's Césaire the prototype Gothic icon. Influencing the likes of Tim Burton and countless other filmmakers, that performance alone remains vastly important. His wartime performances maintain his personal stance of fighting against the Nazis, only ever portraying them as villains. But one role in particular stands above the others for Universal Monster fans. Gwynplaine, the grotesquely grinning tragic hero of The Man Who Laughs, remains Veidt's most influential role for the sake of pop culture. But we'll get into that in the next episode. Join us next week for the finale of Season 1 of the Monster Archives, as we celebrate The Man Who Laughs and the end of Universal's silent era. This episode of the Monster Archives was written and produced by me, Ian Bates. For more on the Monster Archives, including scheduling updates and news, be sure to follow @Universal Studios Monsters on Instagram. And thank you for listening.